Good evening. We are recording and we are meeting with Ruth Lopez, who is one of our more intelligent writers. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, everybody.
Where were you raised? How did you get from there to here?
I don't know. I was raised in Long Island, New York, but my parents moved when I was 12, going on 20, to a small town in Michigan, and it was really traumatic. And then I just, after I got out of high school, I was a little bit of a vagabond, and I was a little bit of a lost soul bouncing around. And I ended up working in a newspaper library where I thought I was going to be a poet. And every time I'd walk through the halls to get to the office, to the back where I was clipping clips and I was going to school at night, I realized that there was a way to make a living with my writing and that I could be a journalist. It was a long time, it was a while ago, but so.
So what did you major in college?
I was a humanities major. At a time when humanities departments were being dismantled. I was at Wayne State University in Detroit. Then I moved to Chicago in the early 90s, and I started going to Columbia.
Why did you move to Chicago?
My husband had a job, got a job at Columbia College, and I got a job at the Chicago Tribune because that newspaper library job led me to a newspaper library in Chicago. And
who have you written for, and what have you done since in the last 20 years?
The last 20 years. Okay, so I was a staffer who worked, I wasn't a writer-editor. I started behind the scenes, which is always kind of a hard place to start when you're at a big newspaper. But I started bugging the book review editor at the Detroit Free Press to let me review books. And so when I shifted over to Chicago, I continued to do that, to try to do other projects. But then, eventually I moved into the newsroom and I became a writer-editor. I've written for, when I was doing book reviews, some for the New York Times, some for the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, all the big guys, not consistently, but all in all, it was a kind of continuous involvement. There used to be a really excellent book review publication called The Hungry Mind. But then I shifted out of literature and into visual arts and broadened more as a cultural writer. And then I started focusing more on art.
As a writer, were you typically paid by the word, or were you under contract? Which?
Well, when I was on staff, I had a paycheck. So I just had a salary.
But if you wrote for the New York Times or contributed to the Washington Post, those were not staff.
Yeah, The Times paid by the word, and everything else had lengths. So if I was doing a long review, I would get, they'd either pay $500 a review or $250 a review, depending on the lengths of them.
Doesn't it?
The word rate has like dropped significantly. So for writers, we've seen a devaluation in our work with the advent of, with newspapers folding and magazines shrinking, etc.
Is it ever so slightly more lucrative to write an art review than a book review because you don't have to read the book when you look at an exhibit?
No, you still have to go to the gallery and look at art, and reading is as pleasurable if it's a great book as looking at art. So no, I don't think taking in any of the culture that one is taking in order to think about it and write about it for the readers is a waste of time. I think that's the reason why I love doing it, because I love to read and I love to look at art. And so I didn't think about it as a waste of time necessarily. I mean, there are times when I had bad encounters with gallery owners or whatnot.
Why?
There's a desperation for some good reason, some understandable reason, to kind of control whatever it is they think they need to control. Their image, and who knows what what happened to them that day. But there's often,
So they're too forthcoming.
What's that?
They're too forthcoming.
Or they're not being forthcoming, but they're being aggressive in a way that tells me something's up for them. But that was really not the norm. So I should make that really clear. Most times there's a very respectful space that a reviewer is given to look at the work and to take it in.
I don't know how to ask this question, not tackily, but what did you have to do to become qualified to write about art when you had previously written about books?
No, that's a really great question. I mean, you could even back it up to say what made me qualified to write about books. I mean,
I'm taking that as a given.
Well, to be frank, I wanted it in a newsroom that was largely indifferent to the visual arts. So when you have a hungry reporter who loves something and is knowledgeable, you're able to talk your way into that section. And
but wait. You just assumed you were knowledgeable. I don't know this. How did you get to be knowledgeable?
Looking at art, reading about art.
But your art historical knowledge is pretty solid.
Yeah, well.
How did that happen?
Here. That's my part of, that's 1/5 of my library. You're caring enough to know about something. You start reading biographies, you look at monographs, you talk to artists, and all that beautiful wall text on museum walls is not lost on me. I've taken you've taken every word, because what the artist is communicating to you, what the curator is communicating to you is as important as what the art is conveying to you. When you're working as a reporter and you're trying to bring back some kind of cohesive explanatory article. Because I specialized, I think, more in the interview and the preview than I did the critique. I did do, and I have done plenty of art reviews, but I favored talking to an artist and getting their story so that we could have some basis for them critiquing the work. And I felt like I was laying that groundwork by presenting explanatory journalism.
I always found it hard to write what one would call an art review because I was always afraid of hurting a friend's feelings.
Yeah, that's because you're an insider. I mean, it pays to be on the outside. That's why journalists, we have a code of ethics. We don't write about our friends. I think it would have been immensely difficult for you, having been in the community.
Yeah, but we've met with other people, art critics who have, all right, maybe I should ask you the loaded question first, but I'll do it back afterwards. No, I won't. Are you ever a proponent of an artist or a certain style of art or a movement? The question is about being a proponent.
Yeah, no, I find myself more comfortable playing that role now because I'm not on staff and I'm not having to run a section, and I feel a little freer about more like connecting people. I did a studio visit and I did an article with an artist like 5 years ago, and it was really clear to me that artist's work and would really benefit from a residency at the Kohler. And before I left, I looked at him, I said, "Do you know about the Kohler?" And he didn't. And I said, "You really need to look at it. I think what you're doing might really," well, guess what? He got in. He asked me for a recommendation. I felt okay about doing it because so it's more that I feel like it's okay to connect people to other people who might not know each other. And I know that's outside of my role, and again, it's not, because I write about art because I love it. It's about being an enthusiast and wanting to support your community.
I'm seeing questions, which I was going to get to anyway, but I'll go there now. How is it determined what you're going to write about?
Well, that's a really good question. Okay, so when I was in charge of a section for a magazine in Chicago, I really felt like it was important to pay attention to the entire city and not make every week be about what the Art Institute is doing and the MCA is doing and all the big guys, but to really pay attention to the smaller galleries and the commercial galleries and the nonprofit spaces. So some of it was I really tried to time it two exhibitions that were opening where people would have a chance to actually attend the opening. I tried to be democratic in that sense. Now, how I choose when I'm pitching personally as a freelancer is different. I wonder, is there something that I have to say about the work that might be interesting? Is there something about it that interests me enough that I can create a conversation? And that's so subjective.
Totally.
Yeah.
So are these things assigned ever? Does somebody call you up and go, Ruth, write about so-and-so? Somebody's got to do this. Yeah,
largely. But I do pitch. I actually, and I've turned down, and it's hard to turn down work, especially in these days. But I have turned down assignments where I felt like this was really about the relationship that the gallery owner has with the publisher than it really is about what I think is happening in the city that people should know about. And how do artists get on your radar? I mean, if you're trying to be democratic, if you're trying to cover something that isn't central and isn't already making a lot of noise, how do you what are the ways that you become familiar with an artist or a venue? Well, I'm on a multitude of mailing lists. And I think once you're out in the world and looking every week, and this is less and less so because when I had leadership of a section, people find you. And I think I was very available, and it was pretty clear how to submit. But it's a little different now that I'm freelancing, and it's sort of you go hunting. It's kind of, and sometimes you just go to you're talking to someone and you hear about something. It's just keeping your ear to the ground. Sort of kind of normal ways that people, huh? You're a good resource with your newsletter. Well, thank you. You're out there. Not as much as I used to be, but yeah, and other people are. And but you get emails directly from artists sometimes? No, I get emails directly from publicity people, press people, in organization, institutions that have press departments. So I'm still in contact with that kind of, and I know that doesn't help the individual artist. I'm sorry. But you don't hear much from individual artists writing, you going, hey, I got a show coming up, hope you see it? Very rarely. Why? Probably because I'm not as visible as I used to be. And I don't promote myself in that way. I've been moving into other forms of writing. And yeah. I'm going into grant writing. I'm helping an institution file for a grant for planning for an art exhibition. So I'm finding ways to use my writing skills to continue to help, but is leaving me time to do my own work and is giving me an income. So I think everyone here can relate to. Are you interested in having artists hire you to assist them in grant applications? I could help. I have done a lot of that. I mean, the question that came up for April about the artist statement really brought to mind how many times I would read promotional materials from artists or statements, and I could tell that they were really struggling with how to communicate their ideas. And I like your advice to keep it short, but I think I would also add, don't see it as a static document, that your artist statement is always evolving as your work evolves, as your body of work changes. And be really familiar with your ideas and be willing to, recast yourself. Sure. I mean, for me, I think the artist statement is not something I'm all that interested in reading. At least when I had a gallery, I could tell what I needed to know by looking at the art. But I think it's a good exercise for the artist to help them focus on what the priorities in their art are. Yeah, and absolutely. I think rewriting it every 3 to 6 months frequently enables them to see the growth of the progression and the difference in priorities,
and benefit their art. I don't know that it's so necessary. You know, I mean, it's good for lay people to look at when you have some kind of an exhibit or to comprehend what's going on. So therefore, it should be kept lay comprehensible.
Wow.
What about you doing catalog essays and things like that for hire?
I've done that. I do that.
Do you enjoy that?
I do.
How do you say no to someone whose work is god-awful? What do you do? Or if you can't stand the person, what happens?
I'm terribly sorry. I'm so busy. I'd love to help you out. May I suggest, and then I've named 3 or 4 other people.
That's that's well done. Okay, so...
always say thank you before you're ready to say, fuck off.
Yeah, definitely. What's involved when that happens? When you look at somebody's work, you like it. What's involved? What's involved in comprehending it and being able to write about it?
I think one of the first things I notice when I'm looking at a body of work is, what are some of the common gestures that I'm seeing? What is the pattern overall? What is the sense that I'm getting? And then it's really, when it's a catalog essay, it's really a conversation with the artist, because I'm trying to help people understand their work. But you notice things. So it's everything from what's common to what are the things that stand out, and then why did you choose this? Why did you choose to do it this way? Why do you use the materials that you use? What have you been thinking about lately to make you do this body of work?
I mean, you're based in Chicago and you travel a fair amount. Or most of the times you do this with someone who's nearby?
Well, what do you mean? I mean, when I was in Mexico City, I would just pitch. I took that as an opportunity to pitch a newspaper a couple of pieces because I happened to be somewhere where something interesting was happening. But yeah, I always try to get some kind of assignment because it's a good tax.
Yeah, but if an artist calls you up from Oklahoma and says, Ruth, write a catalog essay for me.
They're not gonna call me from But if they did, I'd say, well, let me see your work, and let me see if there's something there that I think I can respond to, because if there isn't, I'm not going to be able to do a good job for them.
Can you write without seeing the work in person?
Only photography and digital work, I think, works okay to not see in the flesh, and even so with photography, you're still not getting the kind of paper they're using, but you can. Since I know enough about those materials, I can ask them. I don't like to do that. I like to see the work. I don't think it's a good idea to do everything virtually. I think it's really important to make a studio visit or to go to the gallery. It's imperative, really.
Fair enough.
And also because when you're critiquing the work, you're not just critiquing the work, you're critiquing the show. So a lot of it is also considering the space and considering, how it exists in that environment.
Well, yeah, for that, but I'm thinking about a catalog essay where it's not per se for a show.
No, you got to see the work.
No, I think so too, but I just wanted the clarity from that.
Yeah.
We'll take questions from folks in a moment or 3, but Barbara asked, so I'm going to pitch this to you. Do you have a blog?
I do. It's called Dear Miss Valland. It's at TypePad, and Rose Valland is a great heroine of the French Resistance. She worked in one of the museums, the Jeux de Paume, and was so kind of mousy when the Nazis took over. They ignored her, so they continued to let her work there, and she seemed so unthreatening that she would, write down where everything was being taken to. So consequently, it was through her notes that work was able to be reunited. And
My
so
Name is Men was a really great book and a really lousy movie.
Oh, wasn't it horrible? I called it, what did I call it? Sister Wendy meets Hogan's Heroes.
It was dreadful.
I know, it was such a lost, well, it was a lost opportunity. It really was.
Totally. The book was great.
They completely screwed up her story as well, which is disappointing. But that's only because when it was time to write a blog, my domain name had expired and a stripper had taken it over, which is pretty hilarious. And then I'm like, well, I need to get this going. And she was really on my mind. I thought, well, I'd really, and that was from Raper Europa, the documentary about the looted, when the Nazis looted art. And that's also about the Monuments Men. But that's how, I had just seen that documentary and I thought, well, God, I really wish I knew more about her. I wish I could write. So I decided that I would structure it as a series of letters to her. And it's not really that at all the time, but she's in my head. When I write my little ditties, I'm thinking about her.
Somebody asked about the address, the URL of the blog, etc. And when I sent out the link yesterday for this webinar, there's a URL that's part of Ruth's name, and if you click on that, it goes to her blog.
Yeah, it's on TypePad. I'm about to migrate it, and so, but that's a long story. That address.
Okay, so currently, how much time are you writing predominantly about art, or are you doing grants and other kinds of work more?
I'm doing more grants now. And right now there's a big development grant that I'm doing for an organization through the NEH, which is pretty involved. But that'll be over mid-August, and then I can, you know, be footloose and fancy-free. Now I'll have to get the next assignment lined up. And I started writing about design again. I just did something for Interior Design Magazine. So I'll be, you know, but I'm finding the grant work very rewarding in a way because it's a different way of thinking, and pays better. You can understand that. And it's a little bit of a break that I think I've needed, so that I can appreciate art and not feel like I've got to squeeze something out of it for me all the time.
I was going to ask Sarah's question, so I'm just going to let Sarah ask it, and then we'll just segue into taking questions.
Okay.
Sarah, proceed.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
I was just wondering if when you do the grant writing, if you write your fees into the grant or if it's negotiated and paid in advance or like a paycheck.
I never write my fees into the grant, and this is what my feeling is about that, is grant writing is about building a relationship with donors on behalf of the organization. And oftentimes, and the work is the work. So I overheard someone trying to make a deal where if they got the grant, they would make so much, but then if they didn't, and I think, no, you're doing the work. And that work is also the template for future grant writing that can be, you know, so I think any organization, I know this doesn't apply to individuals, but any organization that doesn't factor in the need to have someone helping them fundraise isn't taking their life seriously. You know, you kind of really need to think about that this person, having someone on staff who can do this, or at least on contract, where they say for the next 4 or 6 months you're working with us at such and such a fee. Because it's not just writing a grant, it's calling those foundations, it's building that, like I said, building that relationship.
So if you're writing a grant for an artist, are you charging a flat fee, or how do you charge?
I write for individual. I mean, the stuff I've done for individuals have been like for friends and for myself.
There are people here who want to contact you about grant. There are people here who want to contact you. So,
you know, I hadn't even thought about it, and I would definitely find a way to structure it in a way that's fair, because I know we're all struggling. And so I have a nonprofit rate. I think I should think about an artist rate, or just a way to help the artist get on track with how to structure their narrative and do that kind of thing. But yeah, yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Good luck.
Sam, you had a question early on, Sam, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a good one, and you're unmuted, and I'm wondering if you remember what it was.
Yeah. Do you ever write about art that is challenging, that is, you know, not exactly art that pleases you aesthetically, but nevertheless still holds some kind of interesting content and worthiness?
Yeah. I mean, I used to say, you know, it's not, there's art that you love where you see, you're like, I could hang that on my wall.
Right.
And then there's stuff like, man, I don't want to live with this stuff, but it really makes me think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Again, it's like, am I responding to the work? Is it making me think? Do I have something to say? And it's no longer about, do I have to own it, or do I want to own it, or do I think it's pretty?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Those can be really fun too, especially when you're working for a mainstream organization and they want you to help people understand why they should like it.
Right.
I'm like, well, I will help them understand why they might enjoy thinking about it.
Right.
And if I can achieve that, and that's pretty good.
Do you find you're doing that often, or is that really rare?
No, it was happening quite a bit when I was pitching at mainstream newspapers, where that question would come up, where the editor would say, well, why should I like it? And, I'd have the voice in my head for what I was responding to them, and then there's a thing that I would say to them, which was much more diplomatic. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are you encountering issues with work that you're making, or?
Well, I don't think my work necessarily looks beautiful over the couch. I don't think my work necessarily, it's a lot of, I'm moving more and more into installations, and that's not about, I gotta find collectors who buy conceptual installations, as ideas, and then
right.
So it's different. I'm kind of
you need to wait for grants.
Yeah, I need to
really
Yeah, I need to learn how to put that brain on, and that's a hard switch for me right now, but I got to do it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck.
Yeah. Elisa, your turn. Go ahead.
Hi, Ruth. Thanks for being here.
Louder.
Hello, Ruth. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Hi, Elisa.
I wondered what the qualities are that you look for in work to get excited to write about, that get you excited to write about it.
Yeah, depth can be, again, I want to see a body of work. So oftentimes, one or two images won't suffice. I need to know that this artist has been really at it for a while, So I look at, and again, it's not like quantity, but it is quantity, in the sense that it represents the time that the artist has spent really trying to noodle around an idea. So I look for how much work they're producing, how involved they are in their, because a lot of times, and I've told this to artists who are looking for galleries or want to have a show, it's like, try to get in a group show. Just, be involved in the community as an artist, and let that lead you to other things. So yeah, I look for this, the more work you can see from an artist, the more you can get what their story is, and, what they're trying to do. And the more there is to talk about and to think about.
Mm-hmm. So are you interested in their history or anything about where their inspiration comes from, or you just want to get it from the art?
I want to get it from the art, and then it works backwards from there. Once I have something from the art, you get more and more intrigued about the artist as you begin to see the work. And I've often, that's where I do my research. I'm like, I really love this. Who is this person? Have they done more? What's their story? Where did they come from? And then I go in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Sure.
I'm looking at Anne at the moment, Anne Mavor, and she's doing interesting work about her ancestors. And it looks, it makes me think that it's a really interesting story for the right kind of magazine or periodical. And I'm wondering if, you would theoretically help an artist and, for example, pitch this under the assumption that you would be writing it and you could draft it in better context, perhaps, than, I'm not saying she can't, but then a visual artist might not be able to do as well. Is that something that's, within your purview?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've done that. Yeah.
So to an extent, we're casting you as an artist ally here who is capable of bringing various tasks and functions to a dialogue, to their dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know. Yes, sure. I think that curators should be of service to artists. And I think to a large extent, too many curators today see themselves as the artist or the person with a point of view that needs to be illustrated. And I find that an unfortunate trend. And I don't see you succumbing to that same ego-driven mania. And that you are capable and desirous of being of service and of facilitating artists and getting their message out, etc.
True. That's true. I mean, I think I was always in every staffing situation I've been in, when I was at the Trib, and then when I worked in New Mexico at the newspaper, at Time Out, every place that I've been on staff, I've been the one pushing for art stories and greater coverage in like the front of the book. Or I used to get really frustrated that the sports pages had all these resources and all this room, and that, you know, sports reporters could go to a game and that was considered part of their job. But for me to leave the office to go look at a show, I'd have to explain to them why looking at the website wasn't good enough, and why getting a CD-ROM or, you know, images or JPEGs. So no, I needed to go to the museum. I needed to go to the gallery. I needed to see the work. And that was always an argument that I felt really frustrated that to me was so obvious. Where was I going? What was it?
I don't know. I'm going to go back to Sam because Sam, go ahead.
It's about advocacy. And I did that because I believed that, you know, it was an important part of our civic life was the work that artists were doing in our community. So yes.
So yes, but you also need to think more about charging. I mean, let's say that Anne does want you to write for Modern Heritage magazine. I've never heard of it, but maybe it exists. And so that, you know, you need to, they may or may not even pay you, so that, but it might augment her career if Modern Heritage, you know, wrote about it. So that you need to charge for the pitch and you need to charge for the article.
Yeah, but this is how it would go. In that case, that to me is placement. And what I would much rather do is not have an artist hire me, but for me to pitch a magazine and then have the magazine pay me. Otherwise, you know what I mean? I know what you're saying, but that's going into...
Some magazines don't pay.
Maybe I need to rethink this, because
I write for Huffington Post, and they don't pay.
I know, but so as a journalist, I get really angry at people who submit to Huffington Post, because
I'm sorry.
It's part of what's happening with the devaluation of writers' fees and whatnot, is that there's all this free stuff. So that it goes into that, and because I came up in the world of journalism, I still have that in me that I need to shift my brain and change. And it's time to change the way I do things, because the world has changed. And so maybe it is about working more in collaboration with an artist and trying to place their story, because now it's about publications needing content. But it kind of pains me that burden has fallen on artists, and it pains me for our democracy that journalism is in such a position that they're not paying journalists to do that work. See what I'm saying? So
no, I do.
I'm caught in the middle of a shift in my profession, or a paradigm shift in my profession, that has given me great pain, and I'm not quite over figuring out how things have changed for me and how to work with how they've changed. So, but I still want to help artists, and I think there's a way to do that where I don't feel ethically compromised, like I'm, submitting a piece of advertising or paid content, as it were. And I got to wrap my head around that one.
Makes sense.
But there's a way to help artists, and there's a way to, tell them what works, and I'm I could do catalog copy, and I can help them with that, and could probably help with artist statements. I could probably help with grant writing and charge fees that are fair, that I feel okay about. that I think are helpful. That doesn't cross into that realm of journalism. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the thing about artist statements is I want to see the artists write them themselves, and except for Paul, I don't want him to sweat that much.
Well, no, but sometimes it's a series of questions with someone, and it's sort of like, you had a good teacher and they asked you a bunch of questions and it got you thinking, and then they write it. Maybe they just need someone to bounce it off of and to be patient, and then to help them with work, maybe it's more of an editing.
Yeah, Dawood Bey gave me a really nice guide for writing artist statements that I share with everybody. And, I don't know. But, I think there are others. I mean, Buzz Spector gave me one also that I think is really solid. So that...
Artists, we need to know how to talk about their work. They need to know how to express it themselves. And the best way to do that is to just try to write. And,
I think it's, I used to, I could do it again. I mean, one is, I think you find an 8th grader and you start talking about your art to them, and the objective is to get them to comprehend it. Yeah. And then you graduate to the person sitting next to you on the bus, and say, hey, can I practice my artist statement on you? Either they think you're nuts and they have an interesting story to tell, or they go, yeah, sure, girl, talk to me. So, I think that...
I just lost you.
Oh. It wasn't that interesting. Whose question do I want to go to?
Hey, Paul, you're wigging out.
And so is Ruth at the moment.
I didn't hear anything you just said.
Yeah, am I back now?
You're back. Okay. It was all twangy and jumpy, so I missed.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. I'm sorry.
It was beautiful. I wish I could tape it. Well, I'm sure you'll have it on your recording. Someone should use it in an installation. It's okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to read simultaneously and talk. Sam, did you want to say more? Sam, I'm going back to you. Hold on. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think it's can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's tricky because I have a lot of friends who are writers, and they struggle with whether they should get paid or not. And, I think if you're an expert, if you've been writing just as equally as long as the artist you've been writing, somehow the artist should find a way to budget that review into their project. I really think that not that we have to all become capitalists, but I get frustrated that artists are always the ones who are having to. I wish we were more equal with doctors and lawyers, and I know that's impossible because we're a totally different service and we're totally different realms. But somehow, you as a writer.
Sorry, wait a minute. Time out. I do not think it's impossible. I think it is totally possible, and part of the reason I do this course is to facilitate it, because I think artists are problem solvers, and I think somebody goes, oh, I got this problem. I'm going to run down the street to Sam's house and see if she can help me with a solution. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I want to hear people go, I got 3 artists living on my block. God, I live in the greatest neighborhood. I think I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I'm contributing to that happening.
Yeah, for sure.
But I agree. I hear what you're saying, and that I think we all have to probably rethink the way we do things, because the world has changed that much. And so it really is about, and I think it's always been about the artist knowing how to sell their work and advocate for themselves. But this is just yet another twist, another element that they need to master.
Right.
And like you say, to budget for, and to think about, and to treat it like a business, in that you want to do your art as your life, as your living. And so to do that, you have to
hire other professionals to help you. You got to see it as they deserve as much as you deserve, whatever the exchange is. Yeah.
Right.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, but I think we're all figuring it out. And I think taking that ownership and taking that control of your life and saying, okay, I'm going to go after this. I'm not going to let someone get, this is now something I can be a part of and I can shape. I'm not going to wait for someone to find me.
Or that you should feel entitled, like, yeah, you should write for me for free, or yeah, the gallery should, pay for everything I don't know. It's just sort of a strange, I just feel like if it's a collaborative effort in terms of an artist getting out there in the world, then everyone should be deserving of something.
Yeah, no, I had a friend who paid for her own catalog and paid for her own postcards and did all the mailing. Because her gallery could only give nominal support in that area. And I don't think she regretted it.
Right.
And then it became part of the budget. You have a budget for materials, have a budget for promoting your work.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't you feel there's a kindredness or kinship between you and artists, Ruth?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm one of you secretly.
Say that again?
I said I'm one of you secretly.
I don't even think it's that big a secret, but that's going to take me to Sherry's question.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Sometimes it's hard to remember the alphabet.
I unmuted myself. How's that?
Awesome. Thanks, dear.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to ask Ruth how she feels about her role as a writer in terms of making or breaking an artist's career. And also, do you ever feel bad about hurting an artist's feelings in a review? I mean, I've had good reviews and bad reviews, and it's really hard to build yourself up after being kind of slammed down. So I'd like you to respond to that.
Yeah, I was known as a gentle reviewer because I tended to only write about work that I liked on some level. I found that I'm not a mean person, but I had, in the capacity of editor, I had one really awkward situation when a reviewer that I had assigned submitted a piece that was pretty brutal, and it was an artist I knew personally, and whose work I liked. I had a difference of opinion with her, and I had to really struggle with not being one of these editors who doesn't let the writer have a point of view. But I was able to help her rephrase things so that it wasn't mean, but it was still critical. And I felt guilty about that because I knew the person. It's a lot easier when you don't know the person, which is what my point that I was telling to Paul. But I think there's a way to be critical without being vicious. And that was my goal. And that's also my criticism of me, that I felt like I had, no teeth. I call it, in a sense. But I'd much rather be positive, and not in a fake way. Just be positive because I think the elements are there to keep the focus in that, I know that artists have to grow, and critique is part of the process. I think by the time that work ends up in institutions, there's already been a vetting process. And so sometimes I would have issue with the way the piece was installed, which had nothing to do with the artist, really. It had more to do with the institution. So yeah, it's a roundabout answer to say if I did it, yes.
Right. All right, thank you.
Are you comfortable, Ruth? This is presupposing the answer. Are you comfortable with me sharing your email address so that these people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm doing it.
Okay.
I've done it.
Okay. Don't be shy. And I'll try to be prompt. But I've got this big deadline, so understand that if I'm not prompt, that's why.
So maybe wait till later in August or something. Where did this question go? Sarah.
Unless it's a burning issue.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I didn't think I had a question.
You asked if there was a difference between...
No, I was just making a comment that I think there's a difference between critiquing someone and ripping somebody to shreds.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity for me to hear from those of you who haven't even asked a question yet this course. All you have to do is type me, and
well, I think writing a negative review is a lot easier than writing a positive review. In this, in the sense that when you really, really love something, you're asking yourself all these questions. You're revealing so much about what you love. You're trying to justify it, and it's a lot easier to be snarky. It just is, and it's cheap. So.
Well, I don't agree. When I don't know. I just worry too much about hurting somebody. I don't feel like I even do criticism. I feel like I'm just a cheerleader.
Well, you're an advocate.
Yeah, big time.
You're an advocate, yeah.
Yeah, she says, dismissing me appropriately. Yeah, I don't know that it's very constructive. I'm hoping I get more people in the door and somebody makes some money is what I hope.
Right, well, but I think it is because it's keeping the community. There has to be an art community that has some health to it in order for any of these conversations to exist. So you're playing a role. You're part of the ecosystem, put it that way.
Oh, wait, I'm being chastised by Sarah for, I'm in trouble now.
What?
She said she said I was critical of her work, and now she's laughing at me. Oh, my God, I'm probably blushing, too.
Yeah, you're bright red over here. But
one of my favorite colors. All right, Jan has a question. Let me go to her. Hold on a second. There she is. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay, if an artist has a show coming up, how can that artist get the local critic to come and review it?
Well, try to give them more than a week's notice. Really, you have to think ahead. And oftentimes, like if it's a magazine, they might be working at a schedule that you don't understand is actually they've put the magazine out already. Like when I worked at Time Out, I was working 3 weeks ahead. And so oftentimes, the more organized you are and the more you can be aware of what their deadlines are, you'll be able to get their attention. I also think that nothing grabs someone more than an image. And so sending an image of your work and an invitation to come to your studio for tea. Invite them to your studio for tea.
Really?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, okay.
Maybe they have time and they want to get out of the office. They want to come. They want to see the work and say, I have a show coming up in a month or in 2 months, and I have some work, and would you like to come for tea? And, they might say no, but probably will, probably because they can't get away. But don't be shy. You'd be surprised. Most of the people who are covering culture are doing it because they care.
Wait a minute. That's a really big point. And that's a really big point to remember. Why don't you repeat that and elaborate a little bit, because that's important.
Yeah, I think those of us that have chosen to cover the arts are doing it because we care. And we are interested. We want to know. And so it's not so much a matter that, oftentimes I would find out about things too late for the schedule that I was under. I also found myself understaffed, and I think more and more publications are really, really stretched. And so to be bombarded by the collective need of everybody, you can imagine would be very daunting. And so that ability to be receptive and open might fluctuate given the demands of that person's work schedule that week. But it doesn't mean they don't want to see what you're doing or they don't want to know about it. You can issue the invitation. They may not have the time, but I think it's a nice gesture. But I'll tell you, they may just say, I just got a crazy invitation to tea, but what is this? And then they look at your work or they look at what you sent them. So just know that I think the hardest part is putting things out into the void and then not getting any response. And it can be overwhelming. I think for having been in a situation where I was woefully understaffed, and there was just so much going on. I wasn't able to respond to everything that came at me, but I looked. I wanted to be on top of it, and I wanted to know who was out there and who was doing what. And I did my best to be democratic, but you know, I think you have to be careful too to not impose your own anxieties and your own need for attention onto like one person or one thing, or in the sense of put it out there, inform the people who need to be informed, and then, you know, it's kind of like when you apply for a job or you apply for a grant, you kind of have to submit it and then forget about it.
Okay. I'm going to do that, and
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
Let me know what happens.
Okay.
Do a gentle follow-up.
All
But
right.
also, you know, don't forget that when you're sending an image of your work, I can't tell you how many times I would get something, there'd be no, if the piece wasn't titled, that's okay. But I would want to know at least the dimensions of the piece and the materials that you used.
Yes.
Because you never know, your image might end up in a calendar, and it might be a visual plug to what you're doing. Because oftentimes I needed an image just to break up the text on a calendar page. So always, when you're sending that, always have all the details together. The date, the time the show opens, the time the show closes, the address, the gallery name. Be as complete, almost like you're writing a very tight little calendar item for yourself, so that it's there and it might get used.
You know, the other thing you can point out, Ruth, is the fact that if you write a decently grammatically correct press release, frequently the publication you send it to will print it pretty damn near verbatim.
I'm telling you, more, and that's happening more and more with a lot of organizations, especially online, the calendar sites. Trust me, they need copy. So, you know, put one tight paragraph of your artist statement in there. Who knows? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, good luck. Good luck.
Thanks.
Cool. Does anybody else have a question? We are at about we've gone an hour time.
Oh,
and
that went fast.
What's that?
That went fast. I thought, oh yeah, there's nothing more to say.
When all is said and done, oh my God, I remember this from too long ago. When all is said and done, all that's left to be said is I love you.
I love you.
So when Nestor's still kibitzing, but all right, does anybody else want to, oh, okay, let's go to Elisa's question.
How do you find writers in your area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Or
gotta
in her area. How does she find it? Yes.
I mean, it's sort of like the advice I was given as a writer trying to pitch to magazines was to actually read the magazine and to know what the style is. When you're doing that, start paying attention to the bylines and start paying attention to who's writing about art. Because, I mean, it's very fluid. You know, people, they come out of the School of the Art Institute out of Columbia as they're trying to train as arts journalists, they're freelancing, and just collect those names. And sometimes if you see like a review in New City or Reader or the Trib, send a note to that department and to the attention of that writer, and it will be forwarded to that freelancer. That happened to me after I left, or when I've written freelance. I'll get a communication in a roundabout way. So how do you find them? Is you pay attention just the way that we're paying attention to art. You need to pay attention to the writing. I can't tell you how many galleries and artists didn't support the magazine when I worked at it, which covered the arts as thoroughly as possible. So it's reciprocal, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it's also about forming relationships, as I've said ad nauseum, you know, and to be complimentary and sincere in writing to a writer about the good work that they're doing, and maybe not even asking anything except saying thank you.
Yeah, that was a rare one, but that was nice. It's always nice, you know.
And then, you know, but then later on when somebody asks for something, you know, and say, I've been following your work for a while, you know, maybe they remember you and maybe they go, oh yeah, I'd like to do something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Barbara the last question. Barbara, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Now I was curious after listening to this discussion, how do you feel about the role of the artist in this society, the role of the creative? And then how do you see the role of yourself as an art critic or reviewer in this society? What's the purpose? What's the real main thing that it accomplishes?
To help interpret what's going on in the world, to help people get in touch with their creativity, with bigger ideas, to, there's this big effort right now. Have you heard about the STEM effort to bring back engineering and math and the sciences in the schools? And it's a national initiative, and now there's an advocacy group that's trying to, it's called STEM, to make it STEAM, which is to include the arts. Because all of this innovation in science and in technology is going to require artists as well. And so I see us as crucial to moving forward and I think we need to be, way back in the, you all know this, in the Middle Ages, I mean, there was no separation, and we need to kind of bring these things back. And so I would say support the STEM to STEAM initiative. I'm an advocate for that as well. John Maida over at RISD is sort of a leader in that movement. And all the arguments are there for why we're important. So I hope that my role is to let people know about things that they might not have known about, and to help people to think and to appreciate artwork.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with what Anne says about thank you for your integrity. Ruth, I think you're special, and I really appreciate all that you do and the contribution that you make in the service to artists in our society, and I think it's a good thing. Thank you for being with us tonight. Let me unmute everybody.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I appreciated it.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Ruth. Good night, all.